San Miguel Prison. Built in 1982 in Santiago, Chile. The building was split into 5 modules or towers. It was initially designed to hold 1,100 inmates. But there was an ongoing problem with Chile. The country had an infamously horrible prison system, leading to multiple issues of human rights. In combination with the low number of prisons and the increasing number of inmates, overcrowding became inevitable. By 2011, only 5 of the country's 16 regions were under capacity, which created a big problem. Poor hygiene and sanitation, a lack of resources for the inmates, and a lack of reintegration programs only made the problem worse. All of this could lead to tension between prisoners. A fight could start, a riot could break out, and fires could erupt. On December 11, 2000, a fire in Tower 2 of the prison began spreading. It took a shockingly long time for officials to stop the fire. In addition, the overcrowding and highly flammable material inside made it a dangerous environment for the inmates. As a result, 7 prisoners died. This became one of the most serious prison tragedies in the country. You would think that this would have been a turning point for Chile. If a fire could start so easily and spread so quickly, there needed to be reforms to improve the conditions inside. However, this was brushed aside, and by 2010, San Miguel Prison had a massive 1,924 inmates, 75% more than the capacity of 1,100. They did not learn their lesson. The day was like any other. On the 4th floor of Tower 5, 11 inmates between 2 gangs were fighting. With a prison so cramped, social status and power dictated everything, from the best food to the best sleeping conditions. Allegedly, the conflict started when one gang wanted to kick out the other from one of the small rooms that had windows. One of the inmates who was a part of this brought out a gas container attached to a plastic tube. He had brought a homemade flamethrower. The prisoner then fired. Someone from the opposite side put a mattress in between them to protect themselves, but patches of flame caught on the blankets and the mattress itself. They tried to smother it out, but in a matter of minutes, the entire room was on fire. Over 140 prisoners of the 4th floor of the 5th tower were subjected to agonizing heat, curling their eyelashes, burning their faces, and filling their lungs with smoke. Officers did not seem to act accordingly. In the account of a prisoner, he stated that there were more than 200 of us who were screaming down. How could the gendarmerie not listen? I was screaming, and the others were also shouting at the gendarmes to come up. I saw that they were burning alive. Although I couldn't scream anymore, I was dizzy. But they didn't help us at all. The only thing they did was wait for us to burn and die. Firefighters did not arrive until 5:57. This was because no officer made any attempt to call emergency services. The call came from an inmate who smuggled a phone inside. However, they weren't even able to work until the 3 lower levels were evacuated by police. That gave the fire more than enough time to spread. News outlets rushed immediately to the scene. They not only captured the shocked faces of onlookers and devastated families, but they also captured the true horrors of the fire. Smoke billowing from the windows, turning the sky into a black fog, hands reaching out, desperate for escape, and the spine-chilling screams of inmates, so loud that they could be heard from the street. After the fire was taken care of and prisoners were sent to the hospital, 81 were reported deceased. This event exposed how inhumane and disorganized many of the prisons were in Chile. To find out more, a reporter went inside to record the living spaces of people. The cells held twice the number of inmates allowed. In a single cell block, 120 prisoners were cramped together. Rotting beds and mattresses gave way to hundreds of piles of garbage. To say that the bathrooms were unhygienic is severely downplaying it. Safety was completely non-existent, with water being in easy contact with electrical wires. The amount of officers, compared to the amount of inmates, were not in correspondence. Out of the almost 2,000 prisoners at the time, there were only 100 guards, divided into 3 shifts. I can't explain further how bad these conditions were, and looking inside, it really paints the picture of how a single mattress on fire managed to claim the lives of 81 people. The shots of the prison on fire and the audio of people screaming inside are absolutely haunting, knowing that hundreds are desperately trying to escape the hell inside. Karl Wallenda. Known all across the world for his amazing high wire acts. Born in Maddenberg, Germany to a circus family, Wallenda started performing at the age of 6. While notably young, he loved to perform, and while he was a teen, found a steady job at a circus. It was there that Karl truly mastered his craft, doing insane stunts high above the ground. But Karl had other plans in mind. An idea so great, he left a circus who taught him everything, and at 17 years old, put together his own act with his brother, alongside 2 others, including a 12-year-old girl who would later become his wife. He called this group the Flying Wallendas. The group traveled all over the world in the following years and found a lot of success. They specialized in high wire acts, balancing on a very thin piece of wire which was dangerously high above the ground. But it wasn't a problem for them. They'd practiced these stunts all their lives, and a safety net was installed just in case anything went wrong. But that was about to change. In 1928, John Ringling saw them perform in Cuba and was quickly impressed with their skills. John Ringling was one of the founders of the greatest show on earth, the most popular circus show in the world. So he hired them to perform in Madison Square Garden. They eagerly took the opportunity, but as they were setting up their show, something was wrong. Their safety net, their last lifeline, was missing. They had lost it somehow in transit. But that didn't stop them, and they performed anyway, leading to one of the best received shows they ever experienced at the time. So from that point on, they completely ditched the safety net. In the following years, things would go smoothly for the Wallendas. The Flying Wallendas became the most popular circus performers all over the world. Karl would eventually get married and have many children, all who would join the family business. But doing these stunts for so long, they would eventually start to see the dangers of working in a circus. In 1944, a fire broke out at a circus they're performing at. That fire killed 168 people. But they were still determined and confident as ever. After all, they were still nailing their stunts. One of their most popular acts, the 7-person chair pyramid, was exactly that. 3 layers of 7 people balancing above 30 feet in the air and with no safety net. In 1962, the front man on the wire slipped up, collapsing the whole pyramid. Mario Walenda, Carl's adoptive son, became paralyzed from the waist down. Meanwhile, Carl's son-in-law and nephew lost their lives. The 7-person pyramid was retired afterwards. A year later, things wouldn't get much better for the family. Carl's sister-in-law fainted during one of their shows. She fell 50 feet to her death. In 1972, Carl's brother-in-law accidentally touched a live electric wire while holding a part of the rig. He was electrocuted to death. Clearly, the risks of being circus performers were starting to show. This didn't deter Carl, however, and he kept performing even more dangerous acts, like crossing a whole canyon while doing 2 handstands. High wire crossing was his whole life, and despite being 73 years old, he had no signs of stopping, unless he physically couldn't, or unless he was dead. On the 22nd of March, 1978, Carl set his sights on Puerto Rico. His plan was to walk across 2 high-rise buildings in the city of San Juan of a distance of 121 feet across. While an incredibly dangerous act, he was confident. But there were some major issues. Just a few months back, Carl had broken his neck in an accident. But even more concerning, the winds that day were incredibly strong. They were as fast as 40 miles an hour. And well, Carl was old. He didn't have the balance and strength he once had, even 20 years ago. But as we all know by now, Carl never backs down from a show. And while cameras were rolling, stepped on the rope to begin his stunt. People watched in person and on TV, hoping that he'd succeed. But very quickly, it was starting to show just how difficult this was for Carl. He stopped in the middle of his walk to readjust his balance, but the high wind was making it impossible. And, well, spectators had to watch this.
Desde el extremo del condado Holiday Inn le llama a sus familiares para que se controlen. Ahí se señor, hemos visto una de las cuestiones más difíciles y más tristes en nuestra vida. ¿Cómo es posible que algo así ocurra, señoras y señores? Ha caído el sensacional Carl Walenda.
That was Carl Walenda's final act. The Flying Walenda's founder and most daring member had fallen 10 stories to his death. Carl Walenda lived as a performer his whole life and died as one, unfortunately in front of so many people. But with the risks he was constantly taking, the chances of something going wrong were growing exceedingly high. A black Ford parked suspiciously close to the building. 5 inmates suddenly walked right out through the gate. Minutes before they crawled out of a hole, they were met by police. But instead of arresting them, they led them to a gate and opened it for the inmates. They walked right out and entered the black Ford, escaping into the night. The escape was not detected until 7 a.m. the following morning. Venezuela learned that day that 5 of the country's most dangerous criminals were now free. Among one of the inmates was Hernan Gregorio Lopez Ortuño, better known as Hernancito. Strangely, Hernancito was in a maximum security prison set to serve 30 years. What was he doing in a detention center, where people are held for a brief time? Well, just a few days before the escape, he was transferred to the center under no authorization. Something was very wrong. It did not take long to find out what happened. The escape was planned 1 year prior, all for $500,000 bolivars, or around $55,000 today, paid to 8 corrupt officials. The selfishness of these people put a very dangerous person on the street, who would only pop up again only 4 months later, and leading to one of the most disastrous moments in television history. That person was, of course, Hernancito. Around 8:30 p.m. on Monday, April 15, 1996, Maria Magdalena was leaving the gym, which she frequently routined. She was accompanied by her friend. As they were each going into their respective cars, 2 men came out of the shadows and demanded them to hand over their belongings. You wouldn't be surprised that one of the assailants was Hernancito. The 2 men stole her friend's car and took Magdalena with them, leaving the other girl behind. She immediately called police and provided details not just of the criminals, but of Magdalena and her residence. Wanting to get a bigger score, they ordered Magdalena to lead them to where she lived. It was an apartment building in the Terrazas de Avila urbanization. When they arrived at apartment 42A, they were greeted by Magdalena's sister, 19-year-old Lorena. The criminals took any valuables they could carry and swiftly left the room. But meeting them on the other side was the police, who got there just in time thanks to Magdalena's friend. The 2 thugs retreated back into the apartment room and barricaded themselves, taking the sisters hostage. From that moment on, a simple robbery turned into a kidnapping, and for the next 22 hours would turn this day into one of the most dramatic days that would remain burned into the country's memory for a very long time. In a matter of minutes, a swarm of patrols from different police forces surrounded the apartment building. The criminals made threats that if the police were to ever enter the room, they would kill the sisters. But surprisingly, one of the kidnappers revealed his identity to the police: Darwin Jose Romero. He demanded authorities to grant him 2 things: that they would be allowed to leave without harm or arrest, and that police provide them with a vehicle to drive off in, and to not be chased. That was the only way they would ever release the hostages. No other resolution could be made. However, hours passed, and neither side could come to an agreement, making every hour more tense than the one before. But they also requested that police contact television channels in hopes to get some media attention, which was quickly resolved. News stations rushed to the scene, capturing every second of the kidnapping and commentating on every single thing. The news broadcast would flood Venezuelan homes in the middle of the night. People at home were glued to their screens, getting anxious, hoping for a good outcome. But you see, the media, while it did provide news to the population, they made the situation 10 times worse than it already was. Not only did they broadcast every single bit of the crisis, they became directly involved in the form of negotiations and interviews. Perhaps the media was influencing the kidnappers directly, making them feel like they have some sort of fame. After a couple of hours, the kidnappers personally requested the media to come to the door for a live interview with the director of Venezuela's National Police Agency, José Lasso Ricardi. At 12:30 a.m., Ricardi stood outside the door in front of a cameraman as it slowly opened. On the other side was Lorena Monagas, and behind her was Hernancito, masked up.
Mire,
Salve con tranquilidad,
señor Lazo Ricardi,
Dígame, doctor.
nosotros queremos salir de aquí,
Bueno,
¿me entiende?
claro.
Mire, a mí no me va a convencer, señor Lazo Ricardi, ¿me entiende? O me matan o yo mato. Oye,
Yo creo que eso no es...
necesitamos un vehículo para salir de aquí. Con ella de aquí. Oye, ya yo estoy muerto en vida, así que
no te va a pasar nada. Si
mire, no
problema
busque
que
convencerme.
tú tienes acá un problema que no es grave.
No busque convencerme.
Es un problema que no es grave, no lo va a agradar.
Si ustedes quieren una solución pacífica, consíganos el carro para nosotros salir de aquí. Mira, ¿entiendes? Me disparan y disparan. Oye,
Si que no te van a
me
disparar.
disparan y disparan. Yo lo que quiero es comer bien y estar bien como están ustedes. Y en libertad. ¿Me entiendes? Disparan. Ustedes están de la parte del otro lado y nosotros estamos de la parte de la otra Venezuela. Ustedes viven en la Venezuela que es chévere y nosotros vivimos en la Venezuela que es de los perros. Queremos un vehículo para salir de aquí. ¿Me entiendes? Si nos disparan, disparamos. ¿Estamos claros?
Estamos claros.
Ok, pues.
During the negotiation, Hernancito clearly expressed how dire his situation was, and that the only option there was to provide them with the vehicles. There was no convincing him otherwise, because he had lived his life in the poor side of Venezuela, broke and impoverished, while the director was well off and had a great life. Two different sides of Venezuela, separated by a door. But as we saw, no conclusion came out of this, and the night passed, unsure of what's to come. In the early morning, the crowd of spectators had grown to be massive, and so had the story. In fact, Darwin Jose, aka Hernancito, contacted Venevisión, the nation's largest network, to have a talk.
Dile a la Sorricaldi que ponga la luz porque me está fallando.
Te explico,
y si él me falla, yo procedo.
Authorities decided it was a good idea to turn off the electricity in hopes that they would surrender. But this only angered the kidnappers. So he asked the anchor to tell Ricardi to turn on the lights, or else he would be forced to kill the girls. Their demand was accepted. They also talked with Lorena and Magdalena's mother, who sent her blessings to her daughters.
Yo le quiero mandar la bendición a mis hijas, aunque yo estoy muy preocupada por ellas, pero yo no puedo estar presente, Nela, porque yo estoy recién operada de columna, hija. Y para mí no es muy fácil llegar hasta allá con esta crisis de nervios, pero yo le mando un abrazo a mis hijas, a Magdalena y a Sofía, que todo va a salir bien y que yo estoy rezando porque todo salga favorablemente para ambas partes.
Her cries were heartbreaking, and she wished she could be there, but due to a spinal surgery, she wasn't able to. But things weren't getting any better on the other end. The kidnappers were getting impatient. They kept up their threats, but police were pursuing an alternate solution. Ricardi was suspecting Darwin Jose to be Hernancito due to intercepting several phone calls he was making inside. The team talked with the phone operating company, who gave the authorities Hernancito's address. When they visited his home, they found his mother. That gave them an idea. If they could bring his mother to him, perhaps she would be able to persuade them to leave peacefully, avoiding any further problems. And that's exactly what they did. Accompanied by a handful of officials and TV cameras, Hernancito's mother pleaded, begging to her son to surrender, promising that he wouldn't be harmed. This tactic had actually worked. Despite stating earlier that there was no convincing him, he stepped out of the room with Lorena Monagas, unmasked himself, and embraced his mother. The police wanted to take him immediately, but he had a few words to say to the camera.
Escúcheme bien, mire, a ninguna de esas personas que están allá adentro le ha sucedido nada, ¿verdad? Únicamente sucedió el fenómeno que ha sucedido, valga la redundancia, pero nosotros no somos ningunos asesinos como supuestamente han nacido ver. ¿Por qué sucede? Sinceramente. Escuchen, ahí todavía quedan 6 personas, ¿verdad? Ahí quedan 6 personas.
He was actually lying to the public here, claiming that there were 5 hostages in the room. I don't know why he lied, now that he was in custody. Despite everything beforehand being incredibly disorganized, they had achieved some success, with 1 hostage free. They just had to deal with the other kidnapper inside, and Maria. His name was Julio Cesar Zambrano, nicknamed the Psychopath. Unfortunately, he was even more violent and chaotic, than Hernancito, something the police would soon come to realize. When the authorities and Hernancito went outside, Zambrano cracked open the door. He was enraged that his buddy betrayed him. They had a plan that they weren't going to back out of, but he left him. When Zambrano opened the door, he fired into the hallway. The bullets hit 3 people, including a detective who, as a result, would become paralyzed from the waist down. The shots alarmed everyone inside and outside, causing confusion and panic. While they were being driven to a hospital, one of the cars ran over the chief of operations of the police. It nearly killed him, causing a giant wound in his skull. Negotiations were halted. For 3 hours, nothing happened. It wasn't until police placed a microphone by the air vents and garbage ducts that they heard Zambrano telling Maria that everything was lost, hinting that he was going to end everything, one way or another. That was the final straw for the police. There was no other option but to force their way inside. They had a simple plan. 2 groups of agents would take on this operation. One group would distract and stun Zambrano by blowing up the main door using a water-charged explosive. The other group would rappel down the side of the building and neutralize Zambrano through the windows. This idea initially seemed solid, and people clenched to whatever hope they had left. Unfortunately, any hope of this working was immediately thrown out the window. Zambrano was watching the news broadcast on the TV, which clearly showed agents rappelling down the side of the building. Any element of surprise was completely gone. When he saw this, Zambrano took Maria Magdalena and himself to the bathroom and placed her in front of him as he sat on the toilet. And he waited. As police came bursting through the door, a thick smoke filled up the whole apartment room. Then, multiple shots were heard. As soon as the smoke cleared, 2 bodies were left: Julio Zambrano and Maria Magdalena. Julio was shot 5 times and was dead. However, Maria had 2 gunshot wounds, one in her pelvis and one in her collarbone. The cameras captured the moment Maria was rushed into an ambulance. And as if surrounding the vehicles with cameras and microphones wasn't enough, the media also began following the ambulance as it drove to the hospital. While the director was trying to calm everyone down and make sense of the situation, he claimed that Maria was alive and that there was a possibility that she could recover. But only a few hours later, Maria Magdalena was pronounced dead. It seemed like the police had absolutely no coordination whatsoever. What seemed like a simple robbery could have been handled completely different. Instead, it turned into an agonizing 22 hours and ended up with one of the hostages dead after forcing their way inside. And that's not including how the media handled this, using it more as a way to generate publicity and money rather than a serious case. It could be said that this would have had a different ending if the cameras weren't filming the agents trying to sneak down the window. Nearly a month later, Lorena Monagas made a statement over the whole thing. She claimed that the agents acted irresponsibly, affirming that once the agents entered the apartment, they started shooting blindly, hinting that it was a possibility that one of them shot Maria. She also said that the water-charged explosive was a complete lie, and that they used a much more dangerous plastic explosive. As for what happened to Hernancito, he stayed in prison to serve the rest of his sentence, but he easily escaped in 2015 after he was allowed to leave the prison only to work and come back to sleep. He escaped on his first day. In 2018, he was involved in another kidnapping, which he was able to escape from, but 3 months later, he was killed during a confrontation with state security forces. I can't express how messy this whole kidnapping was, from disorganized police to content-hungry media. If this was played differently, it could have saved the lives of both sisters. Maria Magdalena was the victim of not only a kidnapping, but of Venezuela itself. A woman hears a knock at her door. She opens it, and in front of her is her ex-boyfriend, Carlos Antonio Avila, completely intoxicated. She had told him before to never come back unless it's to be with or talk to their son, but he was there for a completely different reason. He wanted to get back with her. She dismissed him entirely and demanded he leave her alone. It was the third time that week trying to talk to her, and was met with the same attitude. His response was an overreaction, to say the least. He would surround her house and threaten to kill her and her new partner. Carlos seemed to be out of reason, as he kept telling her to shoot him with her gun as well. Completely fed up with him, she called police and went to the police station with Carlos trailing behind. Somehow, reporters caught the story and conducted a brief interview with her with the cameras rolling, asking questions to how everything started, with Carlos just on the other side of the fence between the two. He tried to get Carlos' side of the story, but he was uncooperative, walking away and fully ignoring the reporter.
No me esté preguntando ni verga, que no le voy a decir nada.
¿Pero por qué, Carlito? Ella dice que la quiere matar usted, hombre.
It's not shown in the video, but police arrived and tried to talk to him before attempting to check Carlos for weapons, but that's when he started to get aggressive. He pulled out a knife and charged at an officer. Right here is where things should have been taken a lot more seriously. A knife is a very dangerous weapon, and even more dangerous with an unstable and unpredictable person wielding it. Instead of holding him at gunpoint, the police officer pulled out his firearm and stayed a distance away, but followed him as Carlos tried walking away. As more cops approached, their partners told them not to get too close to him. We can see the officers position themselves in a way to surround them from all sides. However, this causes a big problem with crossfire. The officers could shoot each other by accident if one decides to fire. Tensions at this point are at an all-time high, with Carlos standing his ground, still with a knife in his hand. His intentions are clear though. He does not want to go into custody. At one point, an officer throws a baton to another who's already holding a rifle, making both weapons practically useless. His biggest mistake here though was jumping the fence 10 feet from him.
No se le joda, no se le escape, tiralo, tiralo, mierda, matalo, tiralo. Pablo. Así es, matalo. Matalo. Hacia Pablo, hay que socorrerlo. Hay que socorrer a Pablo. Hay que socorrer a Pablo. Señores, la policía lo mató. Acércatele. Señores, mató a Pablo.
In a span of 40 seconds, Carlos managed to charge at almost every officer there before being struck 4 times with bullets. He was handcuffed and taken to a hospital where he later died. Tragically, Lieutenant Pablo Bonilla, the man in charge, had his heart pierced and lungs cut. He died immediately. 2 other officers were seriously injured, but luckily survived. The police somehow managed to let an armed individual walk around for several minutes, not taking the threat seriously. Multiple times, they were in close reach of Carlos, and at any point, he could have attacked them. And the lieutenant, despite being a higher rank than any of them, jumped the fence 10 feet away from Carlos, making himself completely vulnerable. And all of this happened in front of a police station. The news broadcast not only showed this disastrous moment, but revealed how poorly trained these officers were. Residents of Nicaragua sadly witnessed this live. Now it remains as one of the darkest moments in Latin American TV. I want to give a massive thank you to Guillotine for being a tier 3 member of my Patreon. You're awesome. As well as Kevin Karani, DJ Warbear, Homeless Man, Jacob Morg, and Raven 2.0 for being tier 2 members. Thank you all. But anyways, I'll see you later.